So, I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of over this COVID stuff, right? It just feels like we're living the same day over again. It just feels like the stress is never going to end. And most of that stress really has to do with this working from home situation for a lot of us, right? So today I wanted to talk about burnout. One of my favorite subjects to talk about, but of course not my most favorite thing to feel. Definitely have experienced burnout many times throughout my career, and it's a bummer. It's a real bummer. So I want to talk about what burnout is, how it's different from stress, what are the symptoms of it, what are the things that lead to it, and then of course we'll talk about some things that you can start doing right away so that you can start recovering from burnout. So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. The World Health Organization says that it's just simply stress that is not managed properly. Boy, is that relatable right now, right? Just doesn't feel like we have very much of a roadmap. So work burnout during COVID. One study shows that we're actually working 48 minutes longer each day. And that really adds up. Yeah, and at the time that study was done, I actually think that it was a little earlier on when COVID first started, because the people that I talk to are actually working 11 to 14 hour days. I don't know about you, but I'm willing to bet that we're working probably longer than 48 minutes each day in excess. Boy, do we feel it, right? Because at this point, we're not working from home. We're actually living at work. That's why there's no end. That's why it's so difficult. So here are some ways to be able to differentiate stress from burnout. With stress, you put in too much effort. With burnout, it's hard to put in any effort. With stress, you feel emotions more strongly. With burnout, your emotions feel blunted. With stress, you feel hyperactive and anxious. And with burnout, you feel drained and helpless. With stress, you have less energy. And with burnout, you have less motivation. With stress, it takes a physical toll. With burnout, it actually takes an emotional toll. So, I don't know if you noticed, but there's quite a bit of overlap in the burnout symptoms with depression. And there's actually some experts that quantify burnout as a different or a certain type of depression. And personally, I kind of like that way of looking at it. There's so much overlap there, and it helps to conceptualize that when we're burnt out, we're pretty sad. We're lacking motivation. We don't have the joy that maybe we once did. So if we look at burnout as a form of depression, it also opens up various different ways of being able to treat it as well. And it also helps just kind of take it more seriously. And here's the thing about burnout is that it actually affects people that are not vulnerable to depression. There are some of us that are predisposed to depression from our genes, and there are some of us that are not. So we don't get as depressed as easily. But burnout doesn't discriminate. It actually can affect anybody, whether you're vulnerable to depression or not. Okay, so now let's talk about what are the symptoms of burnout. Here's your checklist to figure out if this is what you're going through. So the first is that you're cynical about your work. And this might show up in you're being more nitpicky and snippy with your coworkers. You don't get along with them. Your workplace is not supportive, so you feel very disgruntled. You feel very upset. I might be saying some curse words underneath your breath, maybe a whole lot of them. But basically, you're just not happy. You're not excited about your work anymore. Next is feeling as though what you do doesn't matter. You feel ineffective. Feels like I'm just logging in every day and doing the same thing and pushing the mouse around and typing these things to these people and sending this email and attending this meeting, and you take a step back and ask, why? What's it all for? Next is low energy. So this has to do with the mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. You just don't have the energy. It's really hard to even bring yourself to sit down and sit in front of the computer every morning. Just doesn't feel like there's any break. There's nothing new, nothing different. And then finally, headaches, body aches, and gastrointestinal issues. These are obvious signs of stress, but if you're having them in the long run, it can be signs of burnout, or over the long term, I should say. So now let's talk about some of the causes of burnout. One is lack of control. You just don't feel like you've got much control over anything. You feel like there's a puppet behind the scenes that is just pulling or you're a puppet and the puppet master is behind the scenes just pulling your strings. That's how it feels. Work-life imbalance. So here's the thing about COVID in particular is that your employer may not be very sensitive or may not be very aware of all of the things that you're having to juggle. And some of those things are helping your kids with online school, running the family as you normally do, being able to juggle all of the work tasks as well as the home tasks like taking care of the family in ways that we didn't have to before, certainly things that we've taken for granted. You've got more work than you can handle. This is the biggest one that I keep seeing with my clients is that the workload just seems to be getting greater, right? It's overwhelming. There's unclear and or unrealistic expectations. I feel like that kind of goes in hand with there's being more work than you can handle. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you don't really even know what's being expected of you. Kind of feels arbitrary at this point, right? The next is family pressures. So there again, managing remote learning, taking care of the family, caretaking for someone that's been sick during COVID. A lot of us have been sick, so we've had to play the role of caretaker as well. All of this compounds. And also, it's important to keep in mind that you can have burnout in relationships too. It's not just with work. So if you're having burnout at work, but you're also having burnout with your spouse, then you got it coming at both ends. And that is a recipe for disaster. So what are some of the things that we can do to recover from burnout? One, the first step is to simply acknowledge that this is what you're going through. If this symptom checklist sounded like you, if you tick, 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 yep, most of that sounds like me, most likely you're experiencing burnout. Just acknowledge it. The second is to create more boundaries. Now is as good a time as ever for you to finally put your foot down to your boss, or to delegate more responsibility to your employees, or to have those uncomfortable conversations with other people that you've been putting off for a long time. Why? Because you simply can't take it anymore. If you keep going this way, it's just going to keep getting worse, right? So why not turn this into a positive situation, an empowering situation, to have those uncomfortable conversations that you've been putting off for a long time? The next is to create the structure in your day. This is the thing that most of us have by far taken for granted. We had inherent things in our day, inherent structure. The commute to and from work, even though you hated it or dreaded it, it was still a nice time to be able to decompress, to process, and all of that's gone now. And we don't have the water cooler conversations. We don't have people pulling us into conference rooms after meetings to debrief after meetings. And those are things that we're taking for granted now because one meeting just flows into another meeting, and we're not having any breaks, and we're not creating our own breaks. So this is the biggest thing that I tried to get across to my clients is that you're going to have to cultivate your own breaks. You're going to have to cultivate your own schedule. Otherwise, it's going to get determined for you. It likely already is. Next, to change or rearrange your work situation. Sounds kind of weird, right? Now might be the time to quit. It might be, if you're able to. Not many people are, but it could be an option. Another way to look at this is just to make your schedule work for you. Even though you might be working more, maybe you could set like a 12-hour day, but you're not working those full 12 hours. You're just giving yourself from 9 to 9, I'm going to engage in work, but I'm also going to have a lot of breaks in there too. And at that 9 p.m. mark, you cut everything off and you shut everything down for the day. And you also say no to things. If it's an unnecessary meeting, you get to say no. There again, practice that. Also keep in mind, this is not personal. We're all going through this. We have this tendency to get a very one-track mind and feel as though we're the only ones that this is happening to, because we're in our own houses and we're not interacting with other people. So all of that information that we typically get from others about how they're doing it's not there, or it's just less. The next is to recognize the choices that you have. There again, we get very fixated on the one-track mind and feel as though that we've got the puppet master behind the scenes pulling our strings, and we forget that we actually have choices in our day. A good one is actually taking your lunch break, not eating your lunch in front of your computer and just keep working. You've got the choice to take a lunch break. The next is to practice mindfulness. And the whole purpose of this is to regulate your nervous system. So just taking a couple deep breaths, pushing the computer away for a little while, going for a walk, just taking your wellness breaks can really go a long way. The next thing is to actually rethink the concept of work. This is my favorite one. What do I mean by that? What are your reasons for being here? Why do you do what you do? This kind of helps us to reframe what's really going on. Get out of that one-track mind, the narrow-mindedness of this is a task, I gotta do it. This is a task, I gotta do it. Why? What are you doing it for? How does it make you feel? Just simply taking some steps back and asking yourself that can go a long way. And then finally, you want to engage in self-care. And the idea is to hit on taking care of the body, the mind, the heart, the soul, and work. Yes, work self-care, meaning you could decorate your space, taking your lunch breaks. You can also exercise or journal or talk to a friend, engage in hobbies. Yes, a lot of these hobbies are going to be over Zoom right now, but it's a good way to break up your day and be able to engage in something different from work. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to be able to understand burnout during COVID, and you're able to take away some information that you can start implementing right away so that you can start recovering from burnout. Very curious to know what you guys are experiencing and what is it that you're doing to be able to treat your symptoms of burnout and bring you out of it. Let me know in the comments, give this video a thumbs up, and as always, subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this. Take care.